So good afternoon and welcome to our Gloria Day, King of Kings and St. Peter's Bible study as we continue our study on the book of Acts. So we are up to chapter 6 today. So let's see what happens in chapter 6. So chapter 6, if someone would like to read from 1 to 7.
In those days, when the number of disciples was increasing, the Grecian Jews among them complained against those of the Aramaic-speaking community because their widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution of food. So the 12 gathered all the disciples together and said, "It would not be right for us to neglect the ministry of the word of God in order to wait on tables. Brothers, choose 7 men from among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them and will give our attention to prayer and the ministry of the word." This proposal pleased the whole group. They chose Stephen, a man full of faith and of the Holy Spirit, also Philip, Prochorus, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenas, and Nicholas from Antioch, a convert to Judaism. They presented these men to the apostles, who prayed and laid their hands on them. So the word of God spread, the number of disciples in Jerusalem increased rapidly, and a large number of priests became obedient to the faith.
Okay, so here we have the church is continuing to grow, right? So now the disciples are very busy and people are starting to complain. We have the Hellenists or the Greeks who are living in Palestine, but they're of Greek descent. And then we have the native Hebrews, which are also living in Palestine, which speak Aramaic. And they each had their own synagogues, but the Christians worshiped together. So the Jewish people had their home synagogues that they worshiped in, but when they came together as the Christian community, they had to try to get along. And we know that sometimes it's hard to get groups to get along, right? So here they were trying to make their way and trying to get along. So what was their issue? What was the big complaint that was going on in this community?
Our widows aren't getting enough food.
Widows are, right. No one's taking care of the widows. Okay, who's supposed to take care of them? I guess it seems like it was the disciples' job and now they were too busy. And so people were complaining that the widows were being ignored now. So what was going to happen? Who was going to solve this problem? So they got together and they decided, well, let's delegate, right? This is one of the examples of delegation. Let's find someone else to do this task because they were too busy. And so they got this group of men, of course, because again, men were the movers and the shakers at the time. And they had to be holy men and faithful men. And so they chose these 7 men, okay, of good standing, and they let them take on this job. So these are like the first deacons. They were the servants, right? They were the leaders of the church, but their job was to serve. They weren't to preach, to heal, to go and spread the word. Their function was to serve, to take care of people, wait tables, feed people, make sure that all the needs of the widows, and we assume, any children, any orphans, or anybody that was not being taken care of would be in this group that would be taken care of. So they tried to do it. What if this was today? What do you think would be the issue that people would be proclaiming that we're not doing a good job at, that we need help with? Is there anything you think people would be complaining about now?
Evangelizing or stewardship? It could be
Everything.
not too many people, right? Not people in the churches and stuff. And
So ours is like the opposite. Too many people in the church and not enough people going out and evangelizing and spreading the word. Right? Then the disciples were busy going out about town, spreading the word, going to different temples, going into the villages and talking. Now we have everybody hunkered down in our buildings and we don't have people going out. So it's kind of the opposite thing that we have going on today. So here we have this group that would start serving people. And why do you think it was important that these were men of good standing and full of the spirit and wisdom?
Because people wouldn't want somebody who wasn't true to the faith, who did bad things. They want somebody that they can worship, believe in, and they can talk to them about the same things that they wanted. So
Right, and they wanted them good leaders, right? They wanted them dependable, right? You didn't want people that would flake out on you and not show up if they were supposed to be there to work one day and they would never show up. We didn't want people that maybe try to steal the food or something for themselves or sell it or give it away. You had to have people that were trustworthy, that people could trust to be with. And people of good faith, like Joyce said, that you could talk to about the faith while they were there, while they were eating, right? It would be a little bit of maybe they did some Bible study or some work on the faith while they were sitting there together. So here they got them all together. They prayed and they laid their hands on them. Okay, so they commissioned them by same way we commission our in a couple weeks at St. Peter's. We're going to have 2 years worth of deacons being commissioned, laid hands on by the bishop to start them on their ministry. So now we move on to if someone wants to read from 8 to the end of this chapter.
I can read. Stephen, full of grace and power, did great wonders and signs among the people. Then some of those who belonged to the synagogue of the freemen, as it was called, Cyrenians, Alexandrians, and others of those from Sicilia and Asia, stood up and argued with Stephen. But they could not withstand the wisdom and the spirit with which he spoke. Then they secretly instigated some men to say, "We have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moses and God." They stirred up the people as well as the elders and the scribes. Then they suddenly confronted him, seized him, and brought him before the council. They set up false witnesses who said, "These men never stopped saying these things against this holy place and the law. For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and will change the customs that Moses handed on to us." And all who sat in the council looked intently at him, and they saw that his face was like the face of an angel.
Okay, so now here Stephen was kind of the appointed group leader of this group. And now all of a sudden people are jealous or people don't like the attention he's getting. And now, so what do? They falsely accuse him. Right?
Just what Jesus went through. It's almost the exact same thing.
This was their MO. This was how they operated. Someone rose to power, got too much attention, started to take away from others' power, and they started to accuse them of things, of heresy, of blasphemy, of going against some of the laws, right? Now, the freedmen that they talk to here, it says are Greek Jews that had been Roman prisoners and then they were freed. And so when they couldn't win a debate with Stephen, they accused him of blasphemy, right? Same thing as to happen with Jesus, like get rid of the opposition. If you can't win a fight, destroy the opponent, okay? Instead of compromising, instead of getting to know what was going on, learn the facts, they just said, well, we'll just get rid of this guy. And how did Stephen react? What's the last line of this section?
All who were sitting in the Sanhedrin looked intently at Stephen, and they saw that his face was like the face of an angel.
So did he get mad? Did he get defensive? Did he start yelling back at them and say, "How dare you"?
No, he just said what he knew.
He was at peace, right? He's like, "Go ahead, accuse me, okay." And he just quietly sat there and took it. Although he does have a response, we'll see in the next chapter. But he just very calmly didn't
He
respond.
probably was asking Jesus for help at that time.
I'm sure he was. I'm sure he was praying to himself for peace, for calm, for strength. I'm sure he was angry that they were questioning his motives. Here was this guy serving, I'm sure probably working his whatever off, trying to serve all these people and make sure people had food and everything was organized. And now all he was getting was criticism and complaints.
Yeah.
And so,
This is the conflict between the Hellenists and the Hebrews, because the Hellenists, it's a culture, may even be a cultural thing too. As Paul was going out to all the different places, a lot of people didn't necessarily conform to what the Jewish customs were, and maybe this was part of it.
yeah, this was part of what the new church was going to have to butt its head against, that it was always coming against the old traditions, the new people coming in, like their charge from Jesus was to spread the word and bring new people. But the only way you could do that is to bring in outsiders. And so they
And-
weren't part of the original. So they're coming with their own set of values and their own way of thinking. And so now they had to try to make it work and get along somehow. Janet?
Well, I was just going to say, and the people that they were arguing against were people brand new to the Jewish faith. And then they went to the Christian faith, well, thinking that it's part of the Jewish faith here, because it was
Right.
an outcrop
So,
of
yeah,
that.
they weren't steeped in. They didn't go through years and years
No.
and years learning all these laws and all this minutia that they had to know.
But when you're new to it, it's like, well, this is what we want to do. This is what we're supposed to do. And this is, so you try really hard. And then somebody else says, well, this is what you should be doing.
No, you put the spoon on the left instead of the right, like
Yeah.
who cares,
Yeah,
but they were
exactly.
fighting over little picky things that
Right.
that
And
you do.
again, it's unknown because they're from another place. And every time, I mean, it's the same exact thing today. Somebody's from another place. Oh, well,
Right. What was lacking? I mean, to me, a word just popped in my head. There was no grace. There was no forgiveness. There was no room to say, you know what? All right, they're doing it a little bit different, but the job's getting done. It's okay. We can do it two ways. It doesn't have to be my way. But they were not so willing to accept that. And part of it is that that's what they had learned their whole life, that this is the way to do it. And so it was very hard for them to all of a sudden see things done a different way or hear people talking a different way. It goes against what you learned.
Is
And
a question, was it really just that things were done a different way, that it was all minutia that they were talking about? Or was it that they really didn't understand the theology, if you want to say, the word? I mean, it says they argued with Stephen. They could not understand the wisdom and the spirit with which he spoke.
Right.
It seems to me that it was more of a philosophical difference
Yeah,
than
it
it
was-
was.
yeah, but what happens is sometimes when you're fighting about one thing, it manifests in other things.
Well,
right?
sure.
So yeah, they, Stephen, as you see, was a very faithful man, and so he was staying very faithful to Jesus's teachings. And what did Jesus do? He went against some of the old Jewish laws, right? He said, no, it's more important to care for people. So maybe he was serving them on a Sunday, on a Sabbath, right? Or it would be Friday night. So maybe he was having a Friday night dinner where he was serving them, and they were like, no, you can't do this on the Sabbath. That's, that's going against the law. And Stephen was saying, well, these people are hungry. I got to feed them, because he was acting out of mercy and compassion as Jesus did. And they were like, no, you can't do that. So they were continually butting up against the Jewish laws and what the Christians now had kind of not thrown out the laws, but kind of adapted them a little bit, put a little grace and compassion on top of them and said, you know what? What's more important? We can't have someone starving. We can't have someone that needs to be healed. We need to care for the people as Jesus asked us to. And they just, they didn't understand that, they just couldn't. Stephen was a very special person that was kind of above all this. He tried to keep his head above all the little petty fights or whatever. And it's just like, just let me serve people as I wanted to serve them. And they, they didn't appreciate it. And plus now you have all these people coming from different places, right? And so they all want things, they all have their own opinion on things, their own theology. They're coming in with their own way of looking at things. And they were, button heads with each other. And Stephen wouldn't budge on it. And so they started accusing him of stuff. And Stephen's going to respond. We'll see how he responds. And so we'll kind of see what the things were that they were accusing him of, because he's going to go through them in the next chapter. He's going to address all the issues. So we'll see what exactly they were saying he was doing wrong and how he comes back at them. So if someone wants to read chapter 7 from 1 to 8, we'll see Stephen's response.
Who's your hubby?
I don't have one,
Oh,
thank you.
somebody else.
Oh, that's quite all right.
Someone else.
Okay, someone else want to read from chapter 7, 1 to 8?
I'll read.
Okay, Pat, thanks.
The high priest asked Stephen, "Is this true?" Stephen answered, "Brothers and fathers, listen to me. Before our ancestor Abraham had gone to live in Haran, the God of glory appeared to him in Mesopotamia and said to him, 'Leave your family and country and go to the land that I will show you.' And so he left his country and went to live in Haran. After Abraham's father died, God made him move to this land where you now live. God did not then give Abraham any part of it as his own, not even a square foot of ground. But God promised to give it to him, and then it would belong to him and to his descendants. At the time God made this promise, Abraham had no children. This is what God said to him: your descendants will live in a foreign country where they will be slaves and will be badly treated for 400 years. But I will pass judgment on the people that they will serve, and afterward they will come out of that country and will worship me in this place. Then God gave to Abraham the ceremony of circumcision as a sign of the covenant. So Abraham circumcised Isaac a week after he was born. Isaac circumcised his son Jacob, and Jacob circumcised his 12 sons, the famous ancestors of our race.
Interesting that yours goes through the circumcision, where in my version it just says became the father of them. So in your version he's going after the ritual,
Right.
right?
Yeah, covenant. It says, in mine it says
Right.
covenant of circumcision.
So what is Stephen doing here at the beginning? Why does he start with this going back to Abraham?
Well, they know this. They pretty much know this history. This is, he's kind of saying, look, you know the deal. You know what went on. And so he's right away, he's being able to relate to them, and they can say, yeah, that's right. He knows the tradition that we have. So in a way, he's not trying to break the tradition. He's just trying to say that we're really saying the same thing, only, Jesus is the fulfillment of that.
Right, so he's walking them through some of their history to say, look, I'm
Yeah.
one of you. I understand this. I know all about Abraham. I know about Moses. I know about all this stuff.
Right.
I'm not blasphemous. Yeah, I know this history. I read these scriptures. We're brothers in this. We're all together. To try to say, look, we're the same. Don't accuse me of being blasphemous. We have the same God. We're worshiping the same way. And someone want to read from 9 to 16.
I can read. The patriarchs, jealous of Joseph, sold him into Egypt, but God was with him and rescued him from all his afflictions and enabled him to win favor and to show wisdom when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who appointed him ruler over Egypt and over all of his household. Now there came a famine throughout Egypt and Canaan, and great suffering, and our ancestors could find no food. But when Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent our ancestors there on their first visit. On the second visit, Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and Joseph's family became known to Pharaoh. Then Joseph sent and invited his father Jacob and all his relatives to come with him, 75 in all. So Jacob went down to Egypt. He himself died there, as well as our ancestors, and their bodies were brought back to Shechem and laid in the tomb that Abraham had bought for a sum of silver from the sons of Hamor in Shechem.
So again, here he's bringing them forward, right? This is like this chapter is like a little summary of the Old Testament, right? He's talking
Yeah.
about the major stories. These are the things that happen. I know this. Look, I know all these things that you know, and he's bringing them up in the history.
Yeah, I think too, I mean, if you go back to the other chapter, why they picked him, and they specifically say he's full of faith and spirit. He's a man who has tremendous standing and knowledge, and so he's a heavy hitter, and they could, he can talk to the Jewish people, talk to anybody, because he has that knowledge,
Right, and he had the courage, right?
and he had the courage too, faith
up
and
to
the
them.
spirit.
A lot of people will be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Must have misunderstood me." But he goes like right after him. Nope, let me tell you history. You think I'm, against God? Let me just tell you what I know.
Right.
So going through this, like, don't be telling me I don't understand your scriptures. I know them very well, and I'm going to show you that I know them very well. So then 17 through I guess you might as well read to 29. You want to read 17 to 29.
I'll read. But
Okay.
as the time drew near for the fulfillment of the promise that God had made to Abraham, our people in Egypt increased and multiplied until another king who had not known Joseph ruled over Egypt. He dealt craftily with our race and forced our ancestors to abandon their infants so that they would die. At this time, Moses was born, and he was beautiful before God. For 3 months, he was brought up in his father's house, and when he was abandoned, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and brought him up as her own son. So Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in his words and deeds. When he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his relatives, the Israelites. When he saw one of them being wronged, he defended the oppressed man and avenged him by striking down the Egyptian. He supposed that his kinfolk would understand that God, through him, was rescuing them, but they did not understand. The next day he came to some of them as they were quarreling and tried to reconcile them, saying, "Men, you are brothers. Why do you wrong each other?" But the man who was wronging his neighbor pushed Moses aside, saying, "Who made you a ruler and a judge over us? Do you want to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" When he heard this, Moses fled and became a resident alien in the land of Midian. There he became the father of 2 sons.
Okay, so here we have the early history of Moses, right? So, like I said, this is a little summary of the Hebrew scriptures here. The beginning, anyway, of the story. So then we have 32, the long chapter. Oh.
38.
Well, you know, I have a question, Pastor. Hold on a second. I have a question.
Yeah.
It says when he was 40 years old, I mean, that number's significant, obviously, 40 years in the desert.
Yeah.
It came into his heart to visit his relatives, the Israelites. But now he knows everything about the Egyptians. How does he know that his Israelites are his relatives?
Well, remember, Moses was raised by the Pharaoh's daughter.
And his
Yeah,
mother.
but in the Egyptian way, in the Egyptian culture, how does he know he's an Israelite?
But he
Like
was
the-
also nursed by his actual mother.
Right.
Yeah, but he's 3 years old. He's small, isn't he? He's really small. I mean, after 3 years he was born, then he's abandoned, and then so he's being brought up in an Egyptian household. You know, I mean, maybe the kid is so bright that he remembers at 3 that he's Israelite.
No, I think he was abandoned at 3 months old.
Oh,
Right.
3.
Pharaoh's daughter found him, and she
the
hired his
basket,
mother to nurse him.
Take
Oh, she
care of
hired
him.
his mother. Oh,
Yeah,
as a
she was
nurse.
his wet nurse. His mother was his wet nurse.
Oh, so.
They said, we need someone to raise this little baby, and they picked, you know, again, you know, you see God's hand in this, that
God's
his
wisdom.
own mother that wound up being, you know,
Oh, so the mother probably, you know, sung lullabies about Israel and stuff like that.
right.
And his Egyptian mother knew. I mean,
Yes.
the princess or whatever she was knew,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, she knew. So she may have told him she may have told him
Oh,
his birth
okay.
story.
All right.
You know, we found you in a, you know, it was when the women were getting rid of the babies because they were killing them. So they wanted to save the little baby.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So where are we up to? 30.
30.
Yeah. So I want to start reading at 30 and just read till you get tired. And there's really no good place to break here.
Want me to read?
Sure.
Now, when 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to him in the wilderness of Mount Sinai in the flame of a burning bush. When Moses saw it, he was amazed at the sight, and as he approached to look, there came the voice of the Lord. I am the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses began to tremble and did not dare to look. Then the Lord said to him, take off the sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. I have surely seen the mistreatment of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard that their groaning, and I have come down to rescue them. Come now, I will send you to Egypt. You want me to continue?
If you'd like to.
It was this Moses whom they rejected when they said, who made you a ruler and a judge, and whom God now sent as both ruler and liberator through the angel who appeared to him in the bush. He led them out, having performed wonders and signs in Egypt, at the Red Sea, and in the wilderness for 40 years. This is the Moses who said to the Israelites, God will raise up a prophet for you from your own people, as he raised me up. He is the one who was in the congregation in the wilderness with the angel who spoke to him at Mount Sinai and with our ancestors, and he received living oracles to give to us. Our ancestors were unwilling to obey him. Instead, they pushed him aside, and in their hearts they turned back to Egypt, saying to Aaron, make gods for us who will lead the way for us, as for this Moses who led us out from the land of Egypt. We do not know what has happened to him. At that time they made a calf, offered a sacrifice to the idol, and reveled in the works of their hands. But God turned away from them and handed them over to worship the host of heaven, as it is written in the book of the prophets. Did you offer to me slain victims and sacrifices 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? No, you took along the tent of Moloch and the star of your god Rephan, the images that you made to worship. So I will remove you beyond Babylon.
Oh, wow, diaspora.
So here again, he's giving lots of details about Moses, right?
Right?
Talking about how he first met him in the burning bush, and the Lord saying, I am the God of your ancestors, and how he wound up calling him to Egypt, and he led them out. And again, all the 40s, right? The 40 years he was 40
Yeah.
years old, because that's a number in the scriptures, right? And the fact that Stephen would know all this would validate his learning, his wisdom, his knowledge of the scriptures, that he was a religious person, that he wasn't a blasphemous person, that he was steeped in the Jewish traditions, that he was one of them, to know all this minute detail of all this stuff, right? Some outsiders may know the big picture, but who would know all the little teeny details of all this, right? Only someone that had learned this their whole life and been steeped in these traditions. And so he keeps kind of building his case, right? That I am one of you, that look at all the stuff I know. I'm not an outsider. I'm one of you. You can trust in me. Excuse me. If someone wants to read from 44 to 53.
I'll read. Our ancestors had the covenant and with them in the desert. It had been made as God had told Moses to make it, according to the pattern that Moses had been shown. Later on, our ancestors who received the tent from their fathers carried it with them when they went with Joshua and took over the land from the nations that God drove out as they advanced. And it stayed there until the time of David. He won God's favor and asked God to allow him to provide a dwelling place for the God of Jacob. But it was Solomon who built him a house. But in the Most High, God does not live in houses built by men, as the prophet says, heaven is my throne, says the Lord, and the earth is my footstool. What kind of house would you build for me? Where is the place for me to live in? Do not I myself make all these things? How stubborn you are. Stephen went on to say, how heathen your hearts are, how deaf you are to God's message. You are just like your ancestors. You too have always resisted the Holy Spirit. Was there any prophet that your ancestors did not persecute? They killed God's messengers who long ago announced the coming of his righteous servant. And now you have betrayed and murdered him. You are the ones who received God's law that was handed down by angels, yet you have not obeyed it.
Oh, boy, he's really shooting the works to them.
Right?
Oh, these are fighting words. These are
He's
real
laying
fighting.
it all on the line, right? He's like, if I'm going down fighting.
Oh, yeah, he's fighting, boy. Oof.
Right? He's saying, look, I'm the one who recognized the coming Messiah. You people missed the boat. You didn't understand what the prophet said. I got it. You didn't. Don't be accusing me. You're the ones that didn't get it. You rejected God, not me. Yeah, fighting words to be sure. We'll see what happens next. But, you almost know that he knows that he's going down.
He's going to,
This is going to be his last speech, and he's making it worth it. He's saying, you know what, I'm getting everything off my chest that I wanted to say, and he's letting them have it. You know, telling them that, hey, you know, you accuse everybody else, but look in the mirror. You're the ones that aren't the ones being faithful to God. And he points out other times they weren't, right? He talks about the golden calf. He talks about how they didn't obey God. When Moses went up to get the 10 commandments, they couldn't be patient enough. They had to turn to making a golden calf and going against. You know, he talks about how, you know, each time that they turned away and they weren't patient and trusting of God. So how do you think those hearing this would have felt?
Not happy.
Not happy.
They probably felt they
Not at all,
wanted to
right?
kill him.
No,
And
you know,
in mine, it says, my version, it says he called them stiff-necked people.
yeah.
Right? Where do we hear that?
Yeah,
We hear that a lot in the Old Testament, right? That God called them stiff-necked and
next,
hardened
yeah.
their hearts.
Uncircumcised in heart and ears. I mean, that's like, my gosh, really. But you know, this
You're not
is,
in covenant if you're uncircumcised.
if you're
in
uncircumcised, you're not part of it, right? But this is, you know, this is the New Testament interpretation of this. I mean, I'm sure the Jewish people, the old Hebrews would say, well, we didn't kill, you know, we didn't kill them. I mean, this is really, he's really coming right out. And I mean, this is like it's almost like a banner for Christianity here against the Jews. I mean, to tell you the truth, it's a license to go after people who killed Jesus. I mean,
Well,
when you
they
think
had been,
about
yeah, right. Because what had happened is they were going after some of the Christians, right? And so Stephen was, you know, that was probably some of the fight that they were in. And it was all about who was right? Who was right? Was it the people that thought that Jesus was the Messiah as predicted in the scriptures, or the
Right.
people that didn't see Jesus as the Messiah that were still
Right.
waiting? So who was right? Right? And they each thought they were right. You know, each of them thought they were right. And so they would, you know, go at it. So here Stephen is defending his position. He's saying, no, the way I see it is you people missed the sign. You missed that Jesus is the one that the scriptures were pointing to. You were the ones that missed it, not us, not me. You know, don't be mad at me. I'm the one who understood, and you're not getting that. And again, they were not pleased at, you know, no one likes to be called stiff-necked, hard of heart, you know, accused of killing all the prophets and, you know, and everything. They, you know, you were the betrayers, you were the murderers. You know, you have not kept the laws. Yeah, it was tough words that that he was going after, and made it very difficult. So who wants to finish us up 54 to the end of the chapter, please?
When they heard this, they were furious and gnashed their teeth at him. But Stephen, full of the Holy Spirit, looked up to heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. Look, he said, I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. At this, they covered their ears and yelling at the top of their voices, they all rushed at him, dragged him out of the city and began to stone him. Meanwhile, the witnesses laid their clothes at the feet of a young man named Saul. While they were stoning him, Stephen prayed, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. Then he fell on his knees and cried out, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. And when he had said this, he fell asleep.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, now who was Saul? Was that
That's
Paul.
Paul.
one
That's
of the
Paul. That's Paul before he became Paul, when he was Saul.
Right.
Right. So here, young Saul was around in this crowd, And they threw their coats to him to watch them. Okay, here, kid, watch my coat, right?
He was a
And so-
witness.
But he's witnessing this stoning, right? And not only is he witnessing the stoning of this faithful leader of the Christians, he's also witnessing the faith of Stephen that stayed calm and didn't fight back and prayed to God and said, don't hold this against them. You know, it's like Jesus on the cross, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do, right? It's the same thing, that he's in that calm place of knowing that he's going to a better place, right? That he is firm in his convictions, that he's not giving up what he did. He could have certainly said, oh, I didn't really mean it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. I was just kidding, guys. And they, who knows, they may or may not have saved his life. He just took it, right? He was ready. This is like one of the first Christian martyrs. He put himself out there and let himself be killed for the cause, for Jesus, in order to carry on. Because now this would be a sign that look what they did, right? That they were so upset at someone not following the Jewish laws, someone accusing them of not being faithful, right? They were the ones, the Jewish leaders were the ones that like to accuse people of not being faithful. And here it was thrown back in their face, and they couldn't let that stand, right? They couldn't let him get away with that, because then all, you know, who knows what would have happened, revolts or something. People would have all said, look, the Jewish leaders conceded they were wrong. So they couldn't do that. They had to get rid of them. And, you know, so they, you know, they stoned him, which I can't imagine, a horrible, horrible way to die. But they had a lot of horrible ways that they killed people. I mean, crucifixion was ugly and painful and horrible, and stoning, you know, the same thing. Now, how would you describe, what words would you use to describe Stephen's speech that he made?
Christ-like.
I'm sorry?
Stephen was acting Christ-like. He forgave them. He asked the Father to forgive them. He said, take my spirit. I mean, he basically repeated everything that Jesus said on the cross.
Right, he had the faith. He was like, I'm okay with what's going to happen to me. So
Mhm.
it's okay. I'll accept my death. I know I'm going to the Father, and the Holy Spirit, you know, accept me. And like, don't hold it against them, you know, like that's a huge thing. Most of us would be like, well, exact your revenge on them, right? You know, I hope you get what you deserve, you know. And he was like, no, you know, again, you know, although he doesn't say this, probably like they don't understand what they're doing, you know, similar
Right.
to Jesus, like they don't get it. They're not understanding what they're doing here. They
Right.
don't get it.
And Saul, I mean, Saul is a devout Jew. I mean, a Hebrew. He is, you know, he's well versed, he's well learned, and so he might be thinking, well, this is like these people. You know, who are these people? They're rebel rousers. You know, they're just causing a problem. So I have to keep the peace or something. You know.
Right. So now here's young Saul. We assume, you know, probably at an impressionable age, right? Watching this happen, watching the big leaders in the church that are in the temple that he belonged in, the people he had faith in, the people he trusted, the people that taught him his whole life. Here they are saying, this man is evil, this man is blasphemous, we got to get rid of him. So as a kid, what would you think? We have to get rid of these people. They're no good, right? They're a danger. They're
Right.
heretical. They're blasphemous. So we have to get rid of them. Because the next line says, and Saul approved of their killing him,
Right.
Right.
right? And again, what we'll learn in the next chapter next week, we'll learn that, you know, Saul was a very devout Jew. He was a very smart man. When he grew up, he understood, like he could recite these scriptures just as Stephen did, right? He could retell all these stories and quote all this stuff from the scriptures, all of Moses and Jacob and Abraham. He knew all these stories by heart. because he grew up on it in the temple. And so now here at an impressionable age, he sees the leaders of the church that he respected killing the Christians and thinking that was good. But what else does he see? Is there anything he saw at that moment when Stephen was killed that might make an impression on him?
I think you mentioned his calmness and his ability to forgive.
So
Faith.
Stephen, right? He saw this man of faith that was in the other camp, but they saw his faith. They saw his peace, his courage to confront, right? Be willing to speak up to authority and say, no, this is wrong, right? I know my belief. I stand firm in them and I'm willing to die for them, right? That had to leave a huge impression on a young man to see that, right? I'm sure most other people that were in that position would be crying, oh, stop, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, right? And here Stephen was just like, okay, like, whatever happens, God, receive my spirit, forgive them, I'm ready, right?
Yeah.
To have that much faith, to have that much courage, to be able to do that is just unbelievable. So for a young man to see that was part of shaping who Saul would become as a man. And we have to wonder if that wasn't part of why Saul would be picked by Jesus to go on and do the work that he had, right? Because he knew that this was part of his experience, part of what he had witnessed, that he had seen the ugly side of judging people too harshly. He had seen the ugly side of discounting the other, of not listening to the other side's story, right? So we'll see in the story of Saul how he would turn around by listening and learning the story and coming to see the other side. But you wonder if he hadn't seen this bit with Stephen, would he have been as open to receiving that if he hadn't had this experience as a young man?
Yeah.
Of course, we don't know because he did have it. But yeah, unbelievable. And just the faith of Stephen to be able to withstand this kind of torture and be peaceful and forgiving, right? I mean, you hear stories of that, right? You hear, I know the shooting at the Baptist church several years ago, remember that they all came out and said, no, we forgive them. Doesn't mean you can't persecute them and you can't hold them guilty, right? If you need to jail them, well, so be it, but we forgive them, right? Same, I remember years ago, I don't know if any of you, you're my vintage, so you probably remember this. Years ago, there was young kids that, remember they threw the turkey off of Southern State Parkway and it went through the woman's windshield.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
smashed her face, like she had countless surgeries to rebuild.
Yes.
I mean, this woman went through months and months of hospitalization and surgeries, horrible, horrible pain. And at the end of it, she forgave them. Now, they still prosecuted them, but she forgave them because she said, I need to forgive them to move on. Right? Powerful story of how forgiveness can help us move forward, but how we can forgive someone that did something really horrible to us, that most of us would think that might be unforgivable. But I'll never forget that story, that I was amazed at her coming out and publicly saying, no, I forgive them, even though they totally ruined her life, but that she had enough in her heart to be able to forgive those that did that horrible thing to her.
I remember that.
So these are powerful stories when we see people step up like this, that they have that kind of faith to do that. So any other thoughts on Stephen?
Well, another thing that, again, like, I think it's a good point that Paul, Saul sees Stephen and they raised Stephen up as being like full of faith and spirit. And Saul eventually becomes that person, but they have to show like how strong Stephen is, so that Paul can then become the same. And the fact that he has, he also has that background knowledge, in the Jewish faith and everything. He probably figured too that, the Romans tolerated the Jews somewhat, and this, what this new group is causing, too much disruption in the empire. So Saul believed, hey, I want to keep the peace, and the high priest probably said, hey, these guys are getting out of hand. Too many people, they're starting yelling a lot of different things, and the Romans are gonna come after all of us now. So
Yeah, I mean, the Jesus movement was starting to gain popularity, right? People were starting to come to the faith. Starting to be a lot of people. Remember the reason Stephen was a deacon? Because there were so many people to take care of, and there was so much work the disciples were doing. They needed to bring on another team. They needed a whole team of guys just to take care of the sick, and just to take care of the widows and feed them. So that's how big this thing had grown. That if you need 7 men to take care of just the widows, imagine how many people were involved in this movement now. And that was scary to the Jewish leaders, and it was scary to the Roman Empire, that this small little bunch of, riffraff they thought they could just get rid of. That's 12 of them. We'll get rid of the leader. They'll disappear. They'll scatter like flies, right? And we don't have to worry about them. But they didn't. And they kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And they were starting to really get scared at what was happening here. And what were they going to do with this new thing now that was threatening them? And so we'll see how that plays out. So let me stop the recording for now.